Morning. Some of you may have met me on the open day back in November. My name is John Fitzgerald. I didn't look as hairy then. I've not had a haircut for 4 months and not much shaving either. I will hopefully look better in September. Basically, all I'm going to do today is talk to you about film studies and hopefully answer any questions that you've got about the subject. So where we're at, I've been teaching this for 25 years. I'm a senior examiner. I introduced the subject to the college back in 2002. We have 4 hours, 20 minutes a week lessons. Next year, it will be me and another teacher delivering it, a teacher called Dave Watts, who's also very experienced, and it should be absolutely fine. Hopefully, one thing I just want to start with is that you should have accessed the taster material via your schools, and I've only received 2 pieces of work so far. So if you've not done that, it'd be great if you could send that to me anytime over the summer. Like everybody in Leicester, I'm not going anywhere this summer, and just send it directly to my email address. So all I want to do today is a really brief introduction to the course, what we do, where we go, what's happening. Obviously, this is all up in the air because of COVID and other factors. So hopefully, according to the DfE, we're back in September in some capacity. So you'll be with me in G111, hopefully me teaching you all about how great film is. So what do? We basically study 11 films over 2 years. So it's very much like English literature, but with films as texts. The main emphasis is on close textual analysis. And if you don't like essays, it's not the subject for you, because I'm going to get you to write a lot of essays. Obviously, I'll teach you how to do that in terms of textual analysis and also using film terminology. All I look for really is somebody who can write, but also people who are genuinely interested in film. And I'm okay with the Marvel movies. I think they're great, but you're going to have to go a bit further. So a lot of what we're going to do is going to be foreign language cinema, British realist cinema, independent American cinema, some documentary. But what I've tried to do, and I'll do this with David as well, is choose texts that are going to appeal to you and ones that have worked in the past. So if you've been watching films recently, I've watched a lot of films over the last 3 months because I've not gone anywhere. The pubs have been shut, the cinemas have been shut. I've watched a lot of stuff on Mubi and BFI Player, new stuff, old stuff. It's been great. But I'm going to teach you how film is operating in terms of cameras, editing, sound, music. If you're a drama student, performance as well, and something called mise en scène, nice fancy French term for what's in front of the frame. We're also going to look at things like how people are represented in film, the aesthetics of film, or the poetry of film, because I think film is a poetic medium, and you'll see that. And the students who've done this in the past have ended up at the end really, really going further in what they're doing in terms of looking at different types of film and not just people flying around in tights. We also have a number of specialist areas that we look at, and this will all open up the possibilities of what film can do for you. The subject now is highly regarded. It had a bad press in the past. There were people who said it was just a Mickey Mouse subject. This year, 2 of my students are going to Oxbridge, hopefully, in the autumn. And one is just applied to RADA, and I think he's got an offer which is deferring for a year. So top universities are seeing film studies as a valid subject alongside other subjects like history or English language, etc. My philosophy of film teaching, I've been doing this a long, long time. And what I try and do is to open up the whole world of cinema to students. So you're not just watching, as I said, the Hollywood mainstream stuff, but you're watching films from Iran. You're watching films from Germany. You're going to watch sort of like a local film made just up the road in Nottingham by Shane Meadows. One thing that Ofsted, and occasionally I do pay attention to what Ofsted say, is they want us to raise students what they call cultural capital. So this means that I know for a fact as a dad that my kids don't read a lot, but I get them to watch interesting films and interesting television. And what we want to do, or what I want to do, is raise your cultural capital. So you're watching things that are a little bit more challenging, things that are going to disturb you. Definitely. I want you to kind of sometimes leave a lesson and go, what the hell was that? And students do. They look at me and they go, why is he showing us this? And I show it to you to sort of play with your mind a little bit. I am going to teach you how to write. I mean, I'm trained as an English teacher. I have taught film for a long, long time, but I have taught English. I've taught everything. So I will get you to get your essay skills up and running. And they are quite different in film because what we look for is personal perspective. You can use personal pronouns like I, for example. I thought this, I feel this. I want you also to seek out films on your own and find things on your own. I'm in my 50s now and I'm still finding new stuff. I've been watching some Japanese cinema from the 40s and the 50s over the last week or two just to calm me down. A director called Uzo, and it's wonderful. I love it. So there's always new things that you can actually get a hold of when you're looking at film. But I'm also going to teach you how to write screenplays and also develop some filmmaking skills. Hopefully, he says, fingers crossed, everything will be back to normal next year, so that you will be starting next summer to make your own films and write your own screenplays. And I'll say something at the end about careers and links to careers. Again, this is all very up in the air at the moment, but I'll say something as definite as I can at the end of this short presentation. The one thing about students are often obsessed by, I don't know why, is assessment. I do everything in class, so I do lots of timed essays. I don't set huge amounts of homework, although I've had to over the last few weeks because of the pandemic. There are 2 exams. They're taken in the second summer, and I'm a senior examiner on one of those exams, so I know some of the tricks of the trade and what you need to do on those exams, certainly component 1. They're worth 70% of the course. The coursework, which is now known as NEA, is worth 30%. So that's either a screenplay or making a short film. We have got equipment here, although funnily enough, a lot of my students who come in have already made films. They do stuff on their iPhones, they've got their editing equipment, but we can provide equipment here. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. The other thing that we've got here is we've got a college eStream. So nearly all the films that I teach are up on it. So you can access it wherever you want, from home, on your phones, whatever. So you've always got those films to look at for revision or just to go back over the stuff that I might have done in class. And that's a really good resource, and it saved my life actually over the last few weeks with trying to teach Iranian cinema, which has been quite a challenge. The future, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope things are going to be okay. I am worried about young people. I'm worried about my own kids. The one interesting thing that's happened over the last 5 or 6 years in this country is the creative industries have absolutely flourished. They saved us going down the pan last year, GDP. I think the thing is, and I think sciences are great, don't get me wrong, but everybody ran to the sciences over the last 10 years since Mr. Gove became Education Secretary. Now people are saying, well, creative industries, television, websites, filmmaking are making just as much money. Netflix are putting a new studio in Birmingham. I think that's still happening. There are jobs. I've had people coming in from the industry saying, we can't get people to work in sound. We can't get editors. So some of those jobs do exist. Now, I'm hoping there's going to be a pickup. We always need stories. We always need stories to kind of tell us how to react to the world, to kind of get us to reflect on ourselves. So that I don't think the film industry or the television industry is going to go downhill that drastically in the next few years. I hope not. So there are jobs, but you can do film just as a subject alongside your psychology, your biology. I've had students do film alongside maths and physics just because they love film. So combining subjects with film is not a problem. The one question I may get today, so I'll kind of try and head you off at the pass, is can you do film studies and media studies? The answer to that is yes. However, I would say with big provisos. The provisos are, if you do both subjects, that you are thinking about a media or film degree at higher education. If that's your kind of bag, and a lot of students come in knowing that's what they want to do in 3-4 years time, sorry, 2 years time, that's fine. So you can do film and media. They are very distinct. I won't say film is better, but it is. But you can do both, and they do work really well in tandem with each other. What else can I talk about before I get some questions? Results have been really good over the last few years. Students work very, very well. I put a lot into revision, a lot into particularly writing skills, because you've avoided, I don't know how you feel about avoiding the GCSEs this year, but you've avoided that pain, and it is pain. Any exams are pain, but there are tricks. There are things that you can do that students don't do that can get you through exams, that can actually get you good marks. So the results have been good. Lots of my students do go on to university. Not everybody, it doesn't suit everybody. Some go on and study film, some go on and study whatever else they want to do. But ultimately, I think over the last 25 years, 19 years of teaching it here, students do leave with a little bit more knowledge about the world and a little bit more sort of openness. And we're in a time when we're shutting borders and we're closing down freedom of movement. I'm being political. I am political. We should all be political. But this will open your minds a little bit more to the world and hopefully make you better people. And that's a big statement. You're not going to hear that from many other teachers. Okay, if there's any questions, you can direct them to my colleague. There may not be, but if there is, I'll try and answer them.
We've had one so far.
Yep.
So would you say this subject is beneficial for someone who is interested in getting into performing arts like acting or directing?
Good question. Yeah, I've had lots of students who've worked, who've done drama with Sharon. And also it's an opportunity as well to put on your CV. If you get involved in short filmmaking, you, as an actor, you can actually be in those films. So essentially, yeah, it's a good combination. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head how many students I've got this year in first year. I think it's about 8 out of I've got 65, I think still. 8 or 9 students do film and drama. And I think there is quite a lot of overlap. And absolutely, I mean, we study film performance. It's very different to stage performance. So it can make drama students particularly look at their own performances on stage, because it's much more nuanced. Of course, it uses editing. So absolutely, it's not a problem. It's a good thing.
Great. What is the exam board we are using?
We are using EduCAS, okay, which is an exam board which used to be known as WJEC. There's only 2 exam boards or awarding bodies that actually offer film studies. One is OCR. I won't say anything about their course because I work for EduCAS. It would be unprofessional, but where ours is better. It's going to stay the same actually in terms of film choices for the next couple of years. So this won't affect the incoming group. One of the films I teach is Do the Right Thing. If you've been involved in the Black Lives Matter protests or you've been following that on television, when you see this film made 30 years ago, it's still relevant. So I do try as best as I can to pick films. There are set films, I choose them, that appeal to students. And Do the Right Thing, I think this year went down really well. So it's EduCAS, used to be known as WJC.
Great. What are the taster materials and how do we access them? And also, what is your email?
Right, the taster materials I think were sent out to schools, as far as I know, or there's certainly a link on the WQE website about induction. So some people may have missed them. My email is basically John, it's all lowercase, john.fitzgerald@wqe.ac.uk. So my name, lowercase, at wqe.ac.uk. But I thought all this material had been sent out. So I was really surprised because film students are generally great and they get stuff to me. So I think there's been a breakdown in communication somewhere. It might be worth contacting the college directly to find out where they can find that material.
Okay. Following from that, if you go onto the WQE website and scroll down, there'll be a box that says taster activities. If you click on that, there'll be a whole list of the subjects. Click on film and it should be there. So brilliant. That's where to find it.
That's great, thanks.
What films could I watch now to prepare?
Oh, right, that's a good question. Very good question. I always think, well, the film that I would watch at the moment, if you've got Netflix, now not everybody has Netflix, I don't know why, but people don't, is could you watch the new Spike Lee film, The Five Bloods, which is, I watched it last week and I think it's brilliant because we're going to look at Do the Right Thing. Again, don't worry about that. There's lots of films on Netflix, but Spike Lee definitely. If you could even watch a Hitchcock film, an Alfred Hitchcock film, something like Psycho, The Birds, that would be very useful for Hollywood comparison. When we start, we're going to be looking at British cinema. I'm going to start with Shane Meadows, a film called This Is England. There is a TV version of that. I think it's on 4ID. I don't want you to watch that, but if you could maybe seek out any other Shane Meadows films, that would be quite useful as well. So it's just a case of having a look at what's out there. But if you're going to watch anything, maybe if you can catch Spike Lee's The Five Bloods, there is a lot of swearing in it, or you can watch something by Shane Meadows, that would be brilliant, or Alfred Hitchcock, that would be plenty. Okay.
Great. There was a similar question from Emily as well. What do you recommend any films to watch over the summer? So hopefully that answered your question as well. How much support do we get with the coursework?
Basically, I will put everything into play at the beginning. We've got a new AV person starting. I've not met him or her. I don't know who they are yet. And I will have conversations with them in terms of supporting the filmmaking. I support the creative side of it and the writing side of it. So you will get support. I do coursework lessons and I have a very structured way of meeting deadlines. So I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to coursework, well, everything, to be honest with you, with college. So it'll be a kind of very structured way of meeting deadlines, and then I can help you out. So you will get plenty of support. The key with the coursework is to just have a really nice, simple idea for a short film. And often they're not that simple. People want to make feature films in 5 minutes, and that's the problem. So it's having that, if you get that idea right, it's actually fairly straightforward. So yes, there will be support. Can't say anything about the audiovisual support yet, because as I said, our guy who'd been here for as long as I had, he left in January. So I will have a conversation with that person when I get back, hopefully.
Great. Is there a specific genre that the exam board likes to choose from for the exams?
Right, where do I start? I was involved in writing the new film course for months and months and months and months, and we lost genre. We lost genre to media studies. So we don't really, while I mention genre, particularly in a film like Inception, I'll talk about heist movies. Oh yeah, if you can, go and see Chris Nolan's new film, When the Cinemas Open, Tenant. So anything by Christopher Nolan as well, something like Memento. So we don't really look at genre as per se. We look at films from, for example, Britain. We look at films within a time period from Hollywood. We look at the two global films I do are films really that you couldn't really define them generically. Even the only genre film I think I teach is probably Inception by Chris Nolan, which is a heist movie, a thriller. So I don't think genre is that useful to kind of maybe get a hold of. But another useful thing, if it's still on the iPlayer, is the Mark Kermode series. I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called, something like The Secrets of Cinema. And that talks about genre, but it's very, very good. So they should all be on the iPlayer. So the Mark Kermode series on genre is useful as an introduction to maybe getting you into different types of films. So there's not really a specific genre anymore. There used to be, not anymore.
Great. So we've got two sort of similar questions. So what films are we studying, and do we find out the movies as we are films as we are studying, or do we go along do we get told them as we go along?
I like to show the films in class because I like a joint spectator reaction from the class. We've got a massive big screen. I think it's like 80, 90 inches. So it's not a cinema screen, but it's far better than you would have at home. It's also got, we've got a very good speaker unit as well, and it's all Blu-ray, so the quality is fantastic. Basically, I sort of introduce the films and then teach them. Some students have seen the films already. So, for example, we need to talk about Kevin by Lynn Ramsey, which is a brilliant film, a very disturbing film. Some students have seen it, but generally speaking, because there are twists in some of these films, and I don't want people to give things away. So I basically teach the films as I go through. I can give a list out at the beginning. I don't tend to, but I do put a lot of energy into actually, giving people information about the film before we watch it. So the film I always start with, and it's fairly late in actually. It's probably just before half term, because I do a lot of introductory work about how films are put together. Is Shane Meadows' This Is England, and I've always started with that because it's a local film made by a local film director, and it's also a kind of a film about growing up and about, you know, about changes and influences, and it works beautifully. So that's the first film I do. The films I'm teaching this year, I can tell you them. This is England. We Need to Talk About Kevin. I did do Train Spotting last year as a British film, which went down really well. I teach a German film called Victoria, which is wonderful. It's all done in one take. I do a film from Iran called Taxi Tehran, which often has a mixed reaction, but I think it's great. And I do two films, one from the past in the first year called Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock. And I also teach, I mentioned it earlier, Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. So I do 6 films in the first year. In the second year, we have 5 films. And we also have the short films for the NEA. So it's pretty packed. But this will be my 4th year doing the new course. So everything has actually worked, and we had plenty of time for revision at the end. So don't stress about that. For me, there won't be any changes. I think Dave teaches slightly different text, but we're going to probably try and sort of like do similar things this year anyway in certain areas, but we'll see what happens. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any websites you recommend to help us get a head start?
Websites? That's a good question. You could look at the Educast website, which has got lots of digital resources. I think one of the things that I do at the beginning is I kind of get students to think about their own film viewing. And if you go to imdb.com and you look at their top 250 films, for example, looking at some of those films can be a very good introduction to thinking about things like film form, about how the camera works, about how sound works, editing, sound and music performance. So that might be a good start, imdb.com. There isn't any real specific website. There are lots of brilliant video essays out there on filmmakers. I use a lot of them in my teaching, but I think it's time to do that in the autumn when we're up and running. But if you want to make a start and maybe have a kind of way into looking at film, imdb.com is a good place to start, as is the Educast website, particularly with the digital resources.
Great. What career path do students go with film studies?
In the past, students have ended up working at Subway. No, some have. It's a funny question because what I usually get on open day is, where does it lead me? And I think, does anybody ever ask that of history or geography? Okay, nobody does. They do film, I know they do media, and they do, my wife teaches sociology of sociology. See it as an A-level that you do alongside other A-levels, firstly, because you love film and you want to see new stuff and you want to have your head expanded, right? That's the first thing. But in terms of careers, of course, people are, worried about that. I know myself as a dad and a teacher, and I've been teaching a long time. It can lead to jobs in the film industry, and there were jobs. There might well still be in the future. So there are jobs out there which you can get a hold of behind the camera, in front of camera, if you're interested in that. There are jobs in promoting various cinema chains, so PR as well. So there are lots of jobs around the creative industries that are there. They're competitive though. The advice I would give if you're thinking about a job, say making film, is yes, the A-level is really useful, and what I'm going to give you and what Dave Watts is going to give you will hopefully be really useful. But you've got to do a little bit more outside of college. So you've got to make your own films. You've kind of maybe got to do some courses. You've maybe got to take any chances you can with the BFI. I had a student a few years ago. It's weird because he used to be my next door neighbour in Ayleston, Tom. And Tom came into me from Lancaster Boys. His GCSEs were okay. He was a sports guy, really, but he was also interested in photography. And his first year, we did AS then, he got a C, which I thought was great. Did nice coursework. And he ultimately ended up with a C. Had a year out, went to Leeds University. And while he was there, he got a job at a nightclub taking photographs for the club. Okay. And that then developed into making short films about DJs who went to that club. And he was picked up by MTV, and he now works freelance for MTV, and also he's worked for Adidas. and he lives in London. He's got a very nice apartment. Now, but he did a lot of extra. He also got a 2-1 in his degree, which was brilliant as well. He came back to the college to talk to some of my students a couple of years ago. Lovely guy, but he's worked with top footballers. The big thing that really freaked me out was about 3 years ago, he was interviewing Will Smith, you know, which was just bizarre. So I've had students who've gone on to get jobs in the BBC, who've got jobs in MTV, local radio, the local press. Those are the students I know about. So there are opportunities, but you've got to be highly motivated to get those posts because you're going to be up against a lot of competition. So if you're doing extra stuff, that's the thing. And I can help you with that as we go along over the next 2 years. Okay.
Great. So this is about sort of what other subjects does film studies work with? So, for example, English literature, photography, are they good links?
The weird thing about film is that it works with all subjects. I think certainly I do art students do, and photography students, Daryl's a very good teacher, they do bring a very different perspective to film. I've also had students from a kind of business accounting side. Generally speaking, the students that I teach do the following subjects. I'll go through. They do English, one of the English subjects, lit, language or lit. They do psychology, they do sociology, they do history. They seem to be and drama, sorry. They seem to be the sort of 7 most popular subjects. But equally, if you're somebody who is doing, and I've had a couple of students this year, I did last year, maths and physics, and you're interested in film, by all means do film. The skill set who work with film students at HE are looking for people, again, with different perspectives. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I talked to David Lomer, who's our head of physics, and we were talking about this, and we were talking about the overlap between physics and film. Now, you'd never think that, but if you think about camera setups, if you think about the use of sound, that's physics. So it's very broad, but generally speaking, it's from the kind of humanities, ologies, and your graphics, your art, your photography subjects. So, and of course, media studies as well. So all those things kind of do combine quite well. Okay.
Great. So you mentioned that some films might be disturbing. Will we get the choice to watch these?
Yes. Absolutely. I always give provisos, and I always say, look, listen, if there are films that you feel uncertain of, and you're worried about, just let me know. Certainly, the first 2 films I show, This Is England. Well, actually, the 3 British films I think we teach, This Is England, We Need to Talk About Kevin, and Trainspotting, have got moments in them. Definitely. This Is England was an 18. It wasn't down to the violence, weirdly enough. It was down to the swearing. We Need to Talk About Kevin, I think, is a 15. Trainspotting is an 18 because of the drug use and again the swearing. If you've got an issue with any of the films, you talk to me. In the past, I can say hand on heart that I've only had ever 2 students in all the time I've taught at QE who've sort of said, I've got a problem with this film. And usually it's about sexual content. So 2 students in 20 years. But if you do feel uncomfortable or you say, I'm not sure or whatever, no problem. We'll work around it. But I can't change the film, unfortunately, but I can work around it in terms of what we do in sequences, etc. Not a problem. Okay.
Great. Is there a textbook you would recommend?
There are 2 textbooks out there. There's one official EduCast textbook. It's really expensive. So it's just the EduCast A-level new textbook. I can put you in touch with that when we get back. It's about 30 quid. So there's no real need to buy it unless you really feel the urge. There is a new revision guide written by somebody who used to work at Regent, actually, a colleague from the exam board, Jenny Stewart, who lives in Leicester, which looks really good. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, it's not taken off because it was published just before we were locked down. That's something that I would recommend probably later on the course. What I do is I use my own resources. I write my own revision guides. But if people do feel more comfortable about buying a textbook, absolutely. It doesn't cover all the films we teach. It covers some of them. But what I do is I dip in and photocopy for students as it is. So there's not, unlike a lot of subjects where the textbook is the Bible as such, That isn't the case in film studies.
Great. Is there an advantage that the Odeon cinema is close to the college?
It's really good now, the Odeon cinema.
Mm.
I really miss it because I live a short walk. It is, and in the day, if you've got a free lesson, if there's a good film on, go along and watch it. I mean, I do tend, and I didn't do it this year, unfortunately, for my first years, but I'm going to try and do it. I do tend to take students out to the cinema for a morning. We usually go to the Phoenix or the Odeon, somewhere which is pretty close. Don't know if that's going to happen this year because obviously everything's up in the air. But yeah, it's an advantage. And when it opens again, the best place to see a film, I know a lot of people who go to the cinemas are idiots and just go there to eat. But the best place to go to see a film is the cinema, and the Odeon is really good now, definitely. So yeah, it's an advantage. But I want you in my lessons, not just at the cinema, but go at the cinema definitely when it opens.
Regarding coursework, do we follow a specific genre or theme to put it in, or can we decide how we make it and what it's about?
There's a brief. It's pretty open, which I don't think helps students. Yeah, you can do whatever you want really, as long as it's not pornographic, and as long as it's not the big thing is drug use. They don't like drug use. There is a brief. It's really simple. So you have to show the development of one character, conflict between two characters, have a twist, or solve what we called an enigma, a question to be answered at the start of the film, which you only have to do one of those things. So that's very open. So it is open. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think that helps students very much. I think it would be better if it was a little bit more like media studies, perhaps, where they do get a genre or they get a particular type of thing they have to do. And I think that's the thing that my current first years are struggling with at the moment, trying to get an idea about how to go into, how to develop an idea and pitch an idea. It's hard. So it's very open-ended. So it's not something to worry about yet. And the films that I'm going to show you over the next year, hopefully, and the short films particularly, are going to have a direct influence on what you're going to do anyway. So it's quite early days yet. Okay, hope that answered the question.
Sort of like a recap. What else would we do other than studying films? Will we be doing anything practical? So the answer is yes.
Yes, you're learning to write in terms of screenwriting. Obviously, the practical element is filmmaking. A big part of my teaching, which I don't know how it's going to work. You know, I've just been reading the guidelines. I do a lot of group work with students. So I get you into groups to talk about films and produce material. In the past, I'm producing PowerPoints and I do a lot of presentation work. Don't know how that's going to work next year. So I do try, well, some of it's from the front, because I've got to teach from the front. I do like to hand over things to students. I like students to have their own opinion on films and on what I'm doing. So the practical element will be the filmmaking, but I do like students to kind of, I use sugar papers still. I get people to do presentations. I do all those things. It can be boring listening to a teacher for 4 hours a week. You need to do your own thing. So we'll see what happens. We'll work around that. I'll see what Paul says, our principal, about can I do group work. I hope so, because if not, it's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be difficult. Okay.
When we make the short films, I presume for the coursework, will they get shown to the class?
Sometimes I've got time to do that, and this year I was going to do it because and I will show you some of these films next year. Sometimes students feel a little bit uneasy, particularly if they've made a film that isn't very good, and I have had some really terrible films over the last sort of 20 years. If I can fit it in, I do show them to the class because it can be quite nice. Have a little film festival, and I did get some 2 or 3 very nice films this year, really good films. So I will play it by ear. I often do ask students what they want me to do, so I'll hand it over to the group, see what they want. And if I've got time, I'll show them, definitely.
Okay, that's it for the questions. If anyone does think of any more at a later date, you're free to email them to admissions@wqe.ac.uk, and then we'll forward them on to John, and hopefully you'll be able to answer them as soon as possible.
Lovely.
So that's it.
Thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you in G111 in September.